what are some of the practices that we can embrace as ministry leaders that will help sustain our joy through both the highs and lows of ministry? In this conversation, I'm joined by pastor, best-selling author, kingdom collaborator, and movement maker Dave Ferguson. And we have a candid backstage discussion highlighting some habits and some practices that we all can embrace to help us serve for the long haul and finish well. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of FrontStage BackStage. Every single week, we come and bring you a conversation that helps you embrace, as a pastor, as a ministry leader, this idea of healthy leadership, well-balanced, sustainable leadership, both life and ministry. I'm your host, Jason Daye, and we are blessed to be a part of the Pastor Serve Network. And you can dig in more deeply to the conversation we're diving in today by visiting pastorserve.org/network. There you'll find key insights. You'll find questions that you can go over for your own life or even with your staff or your ministry leaders to dig in to this topic. Now, super excited. If you're joining us on YouTube, give us a like and drop your name and the name of your church in the comments below. We love to get to know our audience better. We'll be praying for you and for your church. And whether you're joining us on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to subscribe and follow so you do not miss out on great conversations like the one we have for you today. Very excited to be joined on the show today by Dave Ferguson. So Dave, welcome to the show.
What's up, Jason? Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you. It's funny, Dave, whenever I mention someone, hey, I'm sitting down with Dave today, Dave Ferguson, they're like, oh yeah, Dave Ferguson, he helped found Exponential, right? Or Dave Ferguson, he pastors Community Christian. Or Dave Ferguson, he wrote Bless, right? He's the guy who wrote Bless. Or wait, he's the guy with the new thing. There's so many things you're involved in, Dave. So many ways you're contributing to the kingdom. And I certainly appreciate you carving out the time just to hang out with some pastors and ministry leaders today and really share a bit of your heart. I reached out to you because I've admired you from afar and I've had the opportunity to be involved and engage with Exponential over the years and just see how God has used you and your heart and just an amazing team that you've built around you, which is just fascinating to really impact the world for the cause of Jesus Christ. And as we kind of step back and think, I thought, who would be a great pastor to bring in that could kind of talk to us a little bit about what does it mean really to embrace the calling of a pastor for the long haul? And what are some things, we don't have to look far, unfortunately, Dave, to see, scandal in the church or failure and fallings, and it's heartbreaking oftentimes. And that gets a lot of media. But as you well know, there are lots of pastors who are faithfully serving week in and week out. And we want to do that in a sustainable way. And so, brother, there are great rewards when it comes to pastoring. There are incredible disappointments and challenges. We know that. It can really be an emotional roller coaster, right? And that roller coaster isn't just for us, who are the pastors, but it also impacts our families. And so I'd love to kind of start this conversation because so many of us, have such a heart for our spouse, our kids, as well as a heart for Christ and his church. And that could be a challenge, right? Because of all the emotions and all the ups and all the downs. So over the years, Dave, how have you really sustained joy in ministry throughout the highs, throughout the lows, throughout the kind of emotional roller coaster of life and ministry?
Well, first of all, you're kind to assume that I've sustained that. Because let's keep it real. I would say most days I really love it. And part of that is temperament, because our gifting kind of I am. Like on Strength Finders, positivity is one of my top strengths, and I'm almost a futurist. So I always think, hey, even if things aren't good today, they're going to be better tomorrow. There's definitely been struggles, but I'd say how do I maintain the joy? I remember when I first decided to plant a church, I was so jacked, so pumped because like this was going to be my job. And in some ways, as a kid, like I mean, nobody loved basketball more than me. And, 5'11", guy doesn't go far in the NBA. So I never got drafted. But that idea that someone would actually pay you to play a game that you love. And then when I decided to plant a church and people decided they would support me, and then it got to the size where it was self-sustaining and they were going to pay me to be the lead pastor. I mean, I really thought of it the same way. And so there is a part of me is going where it's not wasted on me. It's like, this is what I get to do, that people are paying me to do this. I mean, and so I think that's a part of it that brings me joy. And along the way too, I mean, I've gotten to be involved in a lot of cool things so far. And I'd like to think that's not been wasted on me. That I genuinely feel grateful that I've got to be a part of Community Christian Church. It's been a remarkable and continues to be a remarkable place. What New Thing is doing, like you mentioned, I mean, we've helped plant over 5,000 churches globally, and it's like, wow. I mean, and Exponential. I mean, you're right. We got a great team. I get to be a part of that. So all those kinds of things. I think I genuinely feel grateful too. And I think both those things kind of like, wow, I get paid to do this, and feeling grateful that the opportunities God's given me. I think the combination of those two things kind of sustain you and get you through some of the days of, you know what, this one kind of sucked.
Right.
But overall, no, I'd say most of the time, I feel pretty joyful and delighted that I get to do this.
Yeah, that's good, and I think temperament does have a lot to do with it. Say to plant a church, you have to be, a pretty positive person, or a little crazy, or maybe a little both, right? In order exactly. Definitely. So Dave, what would you say if you find yourself on one of those days that just doesn't come together, or you're in a situation where things are just kind of, just rough and those challenges? Are there certain things or practices that you have found have been helpful for you to kind of return to this remembrance of the great, you're talking about being grateful for this opportunity, which I think is amazing, to think that God, the creator of all things, invites us to participate in his mission, right? He could do it a million ways, but he invites us, which is incredible. So, but when things are like really, crunch time, things did not go well. Are there certain things you turn to that help you kind of buoy your spirits and in where you are in that gratefulness?
I mean, at some level, there's some things that some practices I've done for, probably 15 years now that help make sure I'm pointing in the right direction. And I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but one of the things I do in my journal, and you know what? Hang on, I'm going to grab my journal. Okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
So, like, one of the things I do I don't know if we've ever talked about it. I do this thing called RPMS.
No, I don't think we chatted, huh?
All right. So like, here you go. Oh gosh, I don't know what secret thing do I have.
Yeah.
Here we go. So, like, you can see how sloppy this is. But in my journal, I'll write these 4 letters at the top of my journal. I do this almost every day. I mean, again, there's some days I miss journaling, but for the most part, this is like a daily thing. And these are kind of some fundamental things that keep me pointed in the right direction. Because you're right, you're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days. You're going to have days where you're crushing and days where, like, it feels like the whole world's caving in on you. And what I've seen, and what you even kind of alluded to, is a lot of leaders, I think they just drift.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't do it on purpose. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you don't all of a sudden end up 50 pounds overweight. It's kind of like 1 pound at a time. Or you don't all of a sudden go like, wow, my marriage is brutal. There's no intimacy. It's kind of like one day at a time over several years. Or you don't suddenly, end up with no money. I mean, all those kinds of things. It usually happens one day at a time. So this is something that I'll go back to every day. And it kind of makes me, kind of says, okay, yeah, you're doing the basic things to keep you pointing in the right direction, which I think keeps me hopefully both healthier and holier. I don't know. We'll see what you think. So I put RPMS relational, physical, mental, spiritual. I just write these. There we go. At the top of my journal.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And then I actually give myself a score, which is a little neurotic, but that's kind of the way I'm wired. And I'll give myself a score on a scale of like 1 to 10. And so like today on relational, it was 5.7. It's like the same as yesterday because there wasn't anything I did particularly good or bad in last week to kind of drift one of physical, same thing. I actually was doing some better eating, but then I also didn't run. So I just so it stayed the same. Mentally, I felt like I was because there have been some things I've been anxious about, but I felt like my focus was better. So I gave myself a little uptick there. And spiritually, I journaled yesterday and did some basic things, so it stayed about the same. And so my score is like a 4.9 overall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's not so much the score, but I mean, I kind of take this from, when it talks about Jesus growing wisdom, stature, favor in God and man. Same thing, relational, physical, mental, spiritual. And in actually doing this on a daily basis and just reflecting, okay, how are you doing relationally? My marriage with Sue, my relationship with my kids. How are you doing physically? Are you exercising? Are you watching what you eat? How are you doing mentally? I mean, are you feeling anxious? Are you feeling fatigue? Are you what's going on? As far as your mental health, and then spiritually, and just by asking the question every day, it's not foolproof, okay? Because this doesn't keep you out of sin. But what it does do is, I think at least it helps you reflect every day, going like, okay, let's tell the truth about how I'm doing. And this has been, I think, to your question, this has been a huge help to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love the intentionality about it because, as you said, Dave, we drift over time.
Yes.
Right. And so this is that anchor point, and there's the intention behind it to help you kind of, again, stick some stakes in the ground, assess, reflect, see if things are up, things are down. And then just that awareness. I've had so many conversations probably in the last 2 months about just us and we in ministry, and just sometimes we just lack self-awareness and we don't even realize it, right? Until someone else points it out, or until, something blows up. And I think that practice, Dave, is really, just trying to be aware of where I am today. Where was I yesterday? Am I up? Am I down? And when we're aware, then we can course correct, right?
Right. And I think a couple things. I mean, one is, I think perhaps the most important leadership we have is self-leadership.
Right.
And so this is kind of like telling the truth about myself. And what I love about this is literally like I did this morning at Starbucks before I started my day at whatever time. And that little exercise, it probably took me 2 or 3 minutes. So think about that, 2 or 3 minutes out of your day. And this is for all the pastors listening. If you'll do this or something like that, just right there in your journal, RPMS. Okay, how am I doing relationally? With the most important, my wife, my kids, my friends. How am I doing physically? Am I doing something to take care of my body? Because that is a part of my leadership and a part of my calling. How am I doing mentally? Especially I think over the last several years, a lot of us, it's just been harder. Let's be honest, it's been harder to be a pastor. And then of course spiritually, what's going on between me and God? And it's been a big help to me.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. It's a great tool. It's a great tool. I imagine lots who are watching along are going to be jotting that down. And like you said, simple, doesn't take a lot of time. But again, it goes back to that intentionality.
Well, I'll tell you what, and Jason too, if you got pastors listening in, you can, I'll just give them to my email address is daveferguson@communitychristian.org. And if you shoot me an email, we have a few tools even on our websites and some other stuff because we kind of train some of our leaders at Community to use this. And I'd be glad to set them up with that.
That's awesome. We'll definitely include that in the show notes. We'll have that available in the toolkit for this episode. So we appreciate that. Awesome, bro. Now this kind of segues into another piece I want to talk to you about. And that is kind of, you talk about the relationship piece. And as pastors, our families are obviously impacted by our role, impacted by our ministry. So can you share with us, Dave, how you as a husband, as a father, how have you over the years in ministry, maybe sort of protected your family or encouraged your family, or, because unfortunately we see, that relationship, familial relationships, unfortunately, under a lot of pressure and stress. So what have you done, and what have you and Sue done and your family done to kind of protect that or encourage that and build into that?
Yeah, and again, I mean, I know because when you do a podcast, you do a workshop, you talk about all the places where you got it right. Right? So I mean, also, I mean, it would be nice if we had my kids on here because they could give a rebuttal, you know. But having, understanding, no, we have not always got everything right, and the marriage isn't perfect. I think one of the best pieces of advice that Sue and I got, this was probably early on when we first were starting community. We had a mentor tell us, in leadership or in ministry, you're going to disappoint someone. Try to make sure it's not your kids.
Mm,
And we took that to heart.
that's
And
solid. Yeah.
it was super helpful. And so, you know what? So when we had to pick between, hey, am I going to do a wedding for somebody, or am I going to show up my kid's game? I was like, okay, you know what? I'm not disappointing my kids. And I think there's places where we would do it, some things differently, but that part, I look back because my kids are now young adults, and I feel like we got that part right. I mean, so like I was able to, like, when my daughter first started going to kindergarten, we started going out for like every week we'd go out and have like a daddy-daughter date. And at first we used to go to Dunkin' Donuts, and then I think we went to Caribou Coffee. And then later, when she was in high school, we started going to Starbucks because she had numbers and we got a discount, which was nice. But I mean, we did the whole run, and I mean, I could get teary-eyed talking about it. But I remember the last time we went out, to Starbucks when she was a senior in high school. After almost every week we would do that. And here's the weird thing. The weird thing is, I don't remember like any single conversation that was this profound, moment. But we have a great relationship still. And I think that built a quality. By every week, we would do that. We got to run the Chicago Marathon together a couple years ago. Last year, she ran the New York Marathon. We went out there and cheered for her. And so, like, we're going to run July 4th together. We'll do a race together. So it's still there. And with my boys too. With my boys, I did the same kind of thing with them, but they were real involved in sports. So I coached their teams, and I went to great lengths to rearrange my schedule to make sure I could be. Oftentimes I wouldn't be like the manager, but I'd be like one of the assistant managers.
Right.
All the administration stuff, but you get to hang out with the kids and stuff. And I mean, those were some of the best times. And I said no to a lot of different things then, but I don't have a single regret. In fact, on that one, I mean, we were just up. We had our family vacation. We were all up in northern Wisconsin. We go to a little place in Door County. I've never heard of it. It's pretty awesome. And and they still want to hang out with us. And it's like my favorite thing of the whole year.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that piece of advice. You're going to disappoint someone. Just make sure it's not your kids. I think is really. And here's the thing too. As a leader, what I found, it was funny. Like I told you, Amy and I started going out like for like a daddy-daughter date for breakfast before school. What I started noticing is, because as the church grew, it got to be a pretty good-sized church. I would see other dads, because I'd put it on Facebook. Here we are eating donuts or something, and that kind of. But I'd see other dads then doing the same thing with their kids.
That's awesome. All right.
And sometimes what we forget is, as leaders, we reproduce who we are. And so you're not only, if you do that, take annual vacations, invest in your kids with, some kind of rhythm like that. You're not only building a relationship with them, but you're also this great, I think, example to other dads who'll start doing the same kind of thing. And fundamentally, I mean, when it comes to leading the church and being a pastor, I mean, your family is the first expression of that church.
Right.
So part of it too, I think.
That's good.
Part of it, I think, too, like I probably accidentally get right, because I was fortunate enough to grow up in a home where, like, I'm going to go have dinner with my mom and dad tonight. And they've been married, gosh, I don't know what, 60 some years. Right. They love each other. They love Jesus. I can remember my dad was a pastor. So I remember as a little dude going into his office, and he worked hard a lot. Okay, but I remember he had like a schedule that he had taped to one of his file cabinets, and on the schedule there, it had everything he would do throughout the day. You know, whether it was meetings and sermon prep, all that kind of stuff. And then it said 4:30. It said go home and play catch with the boys.
Oh,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, so I mean, and he was always at my, he was at my game. So I guess I would say this to pastors listening too. If you can get it, I mean, you're not going to get it 100% right. And even now, I mean, if my daughter Amy was on here, she'd roll her eyes a little bit, and she'd give me a pat on the back, and she'd say, "He did the best he could."
Yeah, yeah.
Which I did.
Yeah.
But like my dad, I think because he did that kind of things, there's some of it I just, that's how you're a dad.
Right.
And so take that into mind too. If you do this with your kids, I mean, your kids may do that with your grandkids.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a really big deal.
Yeah, that's good. I love a couple of things in there, Dave. One was just the consistency. Going back to that consistency. You being present in your kids' lives, you making that a priority, on a regular, consistent basis, I think is huge. But then also you talked both when it comes to other fathers and men in your church, seeing that example, but then also, kind of the legacy piece of it, the example that your father set for you, that you're setting for your kids. It's that ripple effect. And sometimes this is what I love about this conversation is, because so many times we think it's the really big things, the really profound things that make the biggest impact. But just literally in this conversation, Dave, whether it's you doing the little consistent journaling and checking in, or you doing the small consistent things to be present around your kids, it's so often those little consistent things that in reality have the biggest impact. And anyone in any setting can lean into those things. It doesn't matter if you're in, a big city with, 1 million people, or if you're out in a rural community with 1,000 people. It doesn't matter what context. Everyone can do those small, consistent things that honor God, that honor the people around us, and that have that ripple effect, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you know me well enough to think about how much I talk about movement making or multiplication. I mean,
right.
That's what we're talking about there.
Yeah.
And it's not through a church planning conference. No, it's your family and your kids, and hopefully the next generation.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, real quick, I want to ask you, all of us have these markers in our ministry journey, these times we look back on where we experience, deep growth as a pastor, a leader. And oftentimes, we grow the most in times that are challenging for us. And so, Dave, I was wondering if you could share with us, because I've appreciated your honesty thus far. So could you share with us, a time in your ministry that might have been especially challenging?
It really sucked.
Yeah, exactly. Something that was really rough, that you personally faced, and how did that impact your ministry moving forward? How did it shape maybe, who you are today, and how you pastor today, and how you live today?
Let me think which thing. And here's part of the problem with that question too, because I am a futurist and positivity, like I barely remember stuff.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but it's a good question. A couple things come to mind. One at a very practical level. Probably for the first 15 years in the life of our church. As we, this is just real practical. As we brought money in, we spent it. It was like, you got to keep that money moving, keep it, moving for the sake of the mission, that kind of stuff. And what is this saved money? Why would you do that? You got to help people find their way back to God. We got to plant churches. And then it was like 2007, 2008 came, and all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh. And we found ourselves like $500,000 behind budget. And that was a big, big number. And part of it, I think, growing up in a pastor's home too. My mom and dad. I was taught, you tithe, of course, but there really wasn't any conversation about saving money. And so
Right.
I learned at home with my personal, and that was kind of the way Sue and I did it early on too. We didn't go in debt, but we didn't really have any savings. We ran the church kind of that way. And that came to an abrupt halt. And there was a painful season there where we had to let some people go. And in a very real way, I learned, okay, hold it. You know what? I've got to grow up financially. That was stupid. And I didn't realize it. I would say more recently, this is maybe a little more personal growth. That's kind of more of a leadership kind of thing where I had to learn, like, okay, no, you know what having a little bit in the bank, and you don't want to go crazy, but having a little bit there, okay, it buys you time to make decisions. It allows some, for some rainy days. But I'd say more recently, coming out of COVID, we were pretty fortunate as a church, as a community Christian, and we've got good momentum now. But we had to close one of our city locations, and we also had to let a few of our full-time people go as we kind of reorganized things. It was just a different way of doing church, and that was hard.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that was this isn't that old. Part of my wiring is, again, like I've already hit this too many times, the future and positive. But it was really important, I think, for our staff team to be sad and like lament. And so one of the people who's on our leadership commission, like our elders, she's done a lot of work in trauma, and she kind of coached me up. She said, hey, you know what? This is a really hard thing that the whole staff team's going through. And you got to spend some time really with just in lamenting, just let them be sad and talk about it. And again, I'm sure this is a deficit in me, but that's just like torture almost, right?
Right.
And part of it too, honestly, and some of the pastors will relate to, some of you won't. For me, when I made the decision, I was sad. All right. And then then you actually have to announce the decision, execute the decision, and then everybody else finds about it, however many weeks later. And so by the time it actually happens, I'm already over my sad.
Right.
Part of the dynamic, which is weird. But I took the coaching, and we spent like a whole staff meeting just talking about it, being sad about it, letting people process it, cry. And it was a really smart thing to do. And so I think that's one of those areas where I have to, I've had to grow up there still and just go like, you know what, you need to make space for those kinds of emotions too. And I have to be careful, because if I'm not, I'd want to put a spin on it, like, oh, everything's awesome,
Right.
and most of the time it has been, but no, it's not always. And This is one of the times it's not awesome, and to be okay with that. So that's something more recently for me.
Yeah, I love that. I appreciate that. As we're wrapping up, kind of one more question I'd love you to kind of touch on for us, and that is, what are you really focusing on today, Dave, so you can continue to run the race well and ultimately finish well?
Well, I kind of gave you one of those tools, that the RPMs. That's something I don't see changing that, except maybe continue to add to it and tweak that as it helps me. I think that's going to help me continue to lead well, hopefully ultimately finish well, is one of those things. I think maybe there's two focuses. One is on modeling, and the other continues to be on multiplication or movement making. At one level, over here, I really want to model what it means to be a follower of Jesus. So when I wrote the Blessed book, right, and it's, hey, here's 5 everyday practices, to love your neighbor and maybe change the world. If you would have looked on my journal too, I also here, there we go. There's 8 names there. There it is right there, of people in my neighborhood that I'm praying for. I wrote the word blessed, and those are people I'm praying for. So I don't want to be like so over here on the movement making, multiplication side of things but I'm not actually modeling what it means, the stuff that I'm telling everybody else to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good. Yep.
So I want to be living the blessed practices. I lead a small group on Tuesday nights of people that are just my friends. It's not no elite group. These are people in our church. And one of the couples, one of their kids got baptized Sunday, and it was awesome. It's just so awesome. And so I want to do that. Does that make sense? But then on the other hand, I feel like God's continued to give me more influence, and so I'm looking for, okay, who are like network leaders, and who are potential kind of movement leaders, or we might call apostolic people of peace, that I can invest in to help them really scale what they're doing. And there might be a whole bunch of stuff in between that I'm not doing. But I think where I want to kind of live on both ends of it, kind of grounded in actually living as a Christ follower and doing the stuff that I'm telling everybody else to do. Like right now. Okay, so like I wrote Hero Maker, right? And the whole thing is about, at every level you should have an apprentice. Okay, now keeping it real, right now I don't have an apprentice leader in my small group, and it's making me crazy. Which, again, if you look at my journal, I write the question here: hero or hero maker, and I made myself circle the word hero, because it's kind of like, hey, if you don't have an apprentice, dude, what are you doing? But I want to have one. Okay, I'm going to get it. So I want to be doing those things. On the other hand, I also want to be making the most of these opportunities I have to influence, network leaders, not only in the United States now, but also around the world, through New Thing and also Exponential, which is just a blast.
Yeah, I love that. And that's I think, such a good, healthy balance, because we can get caught up in kind of the minutia and caught up in the small pieces. Not that people or relationships are small, but we can get caught up in that and just kind of put our head down and focus there. Or we can kind of dismiss that and get caught up in these bigger things, and then we've lost touch with life on life reality, right? And so now we're up here in all this lofty stuff, but I love how you're thinking through that and trying to incorporate that in your life, that there's touch points on each end, and you're looking for God in both. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I'm talking to people, let's say you're at Exponential, where it is, and I think probably this next year we'll probably talk. I may get a chance to talk about the blessed practices. I want to actually be doing it. Right. I don't want it to be a good idea for everybody else. You know what I mean? Or a hero maker. I don't want to just like be saying to everybody else. I want to actually be doing the stuff. And I think there's a whole bunch of stuff in between that I don't have to do.
Right.
I'm doing that stuff and then taking advantage of these bigger opportunities God's given me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Well, brother, as wrapping up, you've got the ears and the eyes of pastors and ministry leaders right now. Any final thoughts that you'd like to leave with them?
I think if there was one thing I'd just remind them all of, it'd be you will reproduce who you are, or you'll reproduce what you do. And I mean, so be intentional about that. Be really intentional about that, because that's what's you're gonna. So and that's part of my motivation. What are the blessed practices? That's part of the reason I want to have an apprentice leader, is because I know, either explicitly or implicitly, because that's the way culture works, I'm going to reproduce that throughout community and throughout New Thing. And so I would just encourage pastors, remember that you're going to reproduce who you are. So love your wife, love your kids, make disciples, do all that kind of stuff. And guess what? Then they'll start doing it too. Yeah,
I love that. Love it, brother Dave. Thank you so much for taking time to hang out with us today, for sharing your heart, and we certainly appreciate you giving us a little peek behind the scenes on the backstage of your life. It encourages us as we're out there serving as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason.
All right, God bless you, brother. Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, FrontStage BackStage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Daye, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.